Hi, everyone. We'll be waiting 2 to 3 minutes before starting the webinar to accommodate for the rest of the attendees who are in the middle of connecting. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for being part of our community. My name is Valon Kolika, and I'll be your host for today. A few reminders before we start with the session. If you have issues viewing the stream at any time during the presentation and are using the web browser version of Teams, please refresh your browser. If you're using the desktop app of Teams, please exit and rejoin. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be shared publicly. We will post the recordings on our community at aka.ms/security-webinars. And all the links that I'll be referencing there have been already shared in the live event Q&A section or the IM side. Closed captions in several languages are available during the live broadcast, and you can enable them by clicking on the CC button located at the lower right corner of your screen. Feel free to ask questions at any time by typing them in the live event Q&A window, simply by clicking on the Ask Question button. And be aware that you can post your question publicly, or sorry, the questions will be posted by default publicly, and you can also post your question anonymously by checking the box right below where you enter it. So we often get many questions on these webinars, and we will do our best to respond to all of them in real time. But in the event, if the answer was not provided, or if you may have additional questions post this webinar, please don't hesitate to raise them on our Azure Sentinel forum at aka.ms/Azure Sentinel community. We'd love to hear your feedback on how we can improve these webinars, and you can do so at aka.ms/security-webinar-feedback. I would also like to take this opportunity to invite you to our public community by visiting aka.ms/security-community. That's the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements. On our community, you can speak directly to our engineering teams that create our security products. You'll be able to influence our product designs and get early access to changes by doing things like participating in private previews, which you can sign up for at aka.ms/securityprp. You can request features, you can give feedbacks, review our product roadmaps, register for events, or just simply join on webinars like this. We believe that the best way to improve our products is by removing any barriers between you and the people that create them. So we hope you'll join us. In today's session, Eddie Lahav and Yaniv Shasha will guide us through data collection scenarios about the variety of solutions out there available for log collection methods using Azure Sentinel. Both Eddie and Yaniv are senior program managers with Azure Sentinel team. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to them. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Valen, for this intro. We're very happy to be with you all today. And thank you for joining for this session, which is all about data collection scenarios for Azure Sentinel. With me is Yaniv.
Hey, hello, my name is Yaniv Shasha. I'm a senior program manager in the customer experience engineering team, part of Eddie team, and happy to be here.
Thanks, Yaniv. And I'm Eddie Lahav, based out of Israel, part of CXC engineering for Azure Sentinel, managing group of PM and actually responsible of the EMEA and Asia time zones. And in the next almost hour, we're going to review several data collection scenarios that we collected for you to share with you from our knowledge and work with our customers in the field, and really hope you'll find it valuable. So let's start with this. First of all, reviewing our options to collect any security data, of course, at cloud scale from any source. As you know, Azure Sentinel is a cloud-native SIEM running on the Cloud Azure platform. So, of course, for Azure and Microsoft 365 products, we have built-in connectors with a one-click integration with Microsoft solutions for collecting security alerts, activity data. We have also built-in collectors for collecting Ceph and syslogs, whether it's from Windows and Linux. And of course, we have also full support for Taxi and Graph Connector for collecting threat intelligence data. We also have APIs and ways to collect what we call custom logs for all those scenarios that we'll also review in this session, where we don't have built-in connectors, but still are very important for the customers to collect, correlate, hunt, and do all the operations required to better protect your environment. So for that, we have, of course, our logic apps and functions to collect those custom logs, whether there are text files or RESTful API, etc. And we'll review them in depth later in this session. So what are the considerations and aspects we usually speak with our customers and you can take into consideration? So first of all, origin of data. Where's your log sources reside, whether it's on-prem or cloud, whether it's Azure, AWS, GCP, other clouds, and other services. And what's the format or the log file sources, whether it's network devices, application, cloud services, is it a service to service? Are we collecting from VMs, etc.? With regards to latency and throughput, it's important also to check what are the requirements for latency, and is there any requirement for latency, and what's the impact of it, and what is the expected throughput as well. Cost considerations are always a very important topic. We happily discuss this with our customers, and we wanted to highlight two topics here, which of course will deep dive later in this session, whether it's operation sources versus security data sources. Would we want them both reside in the same log analytics workspace or not? And of course, filtering. Filtering is a very hot topic, like how do we do filtering, from which sources, when do we do filtering, etc. And of course, role-based access. How do we implement limited access for various stakeholders in the organization to fulfill requirements, to limit access according to various policies and requirements. So to keep this session interactive, we have a few questions for you. And we'll start with the first one. So you're more than welcome to reach the link above polyv.com/sentinelcxe. And we gathered a few optional answers. I promise you we'll cover more than that in this session, but we can kickstart with this, and we're waiting for your answers.
Yeah, let's see what is the most challenging scenario that you see.
Yeah, what's the common scenario? We have a few of those here, like agentless collection, whether it is something you experience or you see, whether it's log collection from other clouds, splitting, of course, between operational and security log, collecting from files, or log filtering. So we'll.
I think I will go for log filtering. I can vote also. No, Eddie?
Yeah, go ahead, Yaniv.
So yeah, log filtering is a hot topic. Collection from custom files. We will touch most of the subject in the presentation. We can see some results start to come.
Yep.
Okay. So agentless collection, we will also see how we can do it today with Linux.
Good,
and other
good responses. Yeah.
Yeah, good responses.
So we'll give it another minute or so to allow everyone, or almost everyone, to answer.
So when we're dealing with split logs between operational and security log to a different log analytics workspace, we also call it multi-homing, no, Eddie?
Yeah, and we're going to touch on that with respect to our collection agents. We have now one, which is GA, the MMA, and the other one, the Azure Monitor Agent, the new one, which is also out there. And we'll speak about both of them in that sense of multi-homing and other topics as well.
Okay, great.
As soon as we'll see results pausing, we'll switch gears, but I see more and more coming.
So yeah, we have a couple of custom solution around the multi-cloud. With we have of course the built-in connector for AWS, but we also shared some more robust or like covering more workloads on AWS and GCP. This will be by the end of the presentation.
I want to allow everyone to vote, so I won't rush to the next slide. It seems like we're still receiving answers here, which is great. Keep them coming. And Yaniv, we're going to touch base on 365 as well, right?
Yeah.
365.
We didn't add it as a challenge or scenario, but we will touch how you can collect from a multiple tenant, maybe aggregate to a single Sentinel, maybe split it to a different Sentinel scenario. And again, every item here is something that our team, that is deployment team and working with big customer all around the globe, is really touch and encounter. So it's a real scenario from the real world as we working with the field.
Okay, so being minded of the time, I think that's a great view of the distribution of answers and the main topics that are of your interest. And let's switch gears to our agenda actually for this session. So we gathered all the scenario and requirements together with the solutions, and this would be our agenda for that session. So we'll start with log filtering, and then we'll move on to the scenario where the agent cannot be installed on the VM. Then we'll discuss about a scenario where the servers are blocked from internet access in a sort of an internal network within the organization, within your VNets or whatever it is. RBAC would be the second one with restriction for access according to
a cool demo. Yeah.
And we'll have a demo there and a few more surprises with a few more questions to keep it interactive, right, Yaniv?
Yeah.
And then we'll discuss about the splitting of logs between ops and sec logs. We'll move forward with custom log collection and touch base on Office 365. And of course, we'll end with other clouds collection from AWS and GCP. And of course, we have our team members also answering your questions in the background. So it's a good timing for us also to thank our team that is assisting us in this webinar to answer your questions. And please continue asking. So, Yaniv, would you like to take us for the first scenario?
Yeah, yes, filter. I think this is the most common one, only collect what matter. And we will start with the agent collection, like collecting logs from operating system. It can be Linux and it can be Windows. And we will start with the Microsoft Monitoring Agent. This is like we call it the old agent or the existing one that allow us as customer to collect a collection tiers, basically. It's defined as group of events that for collection, common, minimal, full, and basically each and every server that connected to the same workspace, Sentinel instance, will be we will collect this event from the computer. But now we have a new agent. It's called AMA or Azure Monitoring Agent that allow us to be very granular and very specific on what to collect. Basically, we have expat queries that we all know from the web world that allow us to basically write a query, the JSON file, to dictate what to collect. You can get granular by the specific event. And the other important topic, and this is part of the DCR rule, it's allow you to push this configuration to a different computer group. So let's assume that I have domain controller and I want to collect specific events from the domain controller group. So I can push DCR, specific DCR to a DC, or maybe to a SQL server. So this is still in a preview, in a public preview, and we are working hard to make it as GA. Another cool feature that is coming with the agent is multi-homing for Linux box. Basically, as Eddie mentioned, you can split the log between operational data, maybe performance metric, and security data, syslog data from the Linux. So this is another cool feature that we are waiting for. Next slide, Eddie, please. And let's start digging with more advanced scenario. So Logstash. In Azure Sentinel, we have a connector based on Logstash. Logstash, as you all know or don't know, it's part of the ELK stack that allow us to input data, process it, maybe filtering it, and then send it to a destination. How Logstash integrate with Sentinel? Basically, we have output plugin that our dev team wrote and published in our official GitHub that allow us to write the data into Sentinel, into custom log. I will explain shortly what is custom log. In this scenario, we are dealing filtering, but we are giving you two scenarios here, two scenarios. One is how you can use Logstash to mask the data. Thanks for the zoom, Eddie. In the left side, you can see how, and we hear it a lot from customers that doesn't want to upload data, sensitive data in the cloud. And because Logstash has a great like filtering and masking capability and operation, you can mask the data before you are sending it to the cloud, to Azure Sentinel. In the right side, we have a different config file that help us to remove specific fields. And this is like related to only collect what matter, reducing cost. And in this case, we are only collecting a specific event with a specific tag. And also we can dictate what field we want to collect from this logs file. So we aggregate, so we check each and every row. We decide if it's match our filter, and if yes, we can select the field itself. I touch a bit on a custom logs. Custom logs, every time that we use API in Log Analytics and Sentinel, behind the scene, we are writing it to a custom table, _CL. You probably saw it in your schema. And some of Sentinel feature, this is something on the roadmap, will be aligned better with the custom log support. Next scenario, it's basically touched the same use cases basically, but now we are talking about Linux collection, how you can do the same filtering, the same masking, but natively with rsyslog or syslog ng, the well-known daemon that part of the Linux distro. And we are sharing here two examples that is part of the rsyslog.conf. One of them is reducing noise or suppress specific alert or event, sorry. And the other one is the same use case about masking and removing PII, but this time we are doing it on an email, in an email address. The advantage to use native filtering in Linux is basically that the data will send to the agent. We are doing it in the daemon one step before the agent itself, and then the agent itself will upload it to a syslog table, to a native syslog table. So this is the main benefit of filtering in Linux. Because we know that Logstash is part of critical collection pipeline, we give you here two examples how you can scale it. Basically, it's more attached to scaling on the cloud. We share two links to our GitHub, how you can do Logstash over a VM scale set, and how you can scale Logstash via AKS. So yeah, this is the two links and two reference to collection in scale with Logstash.
So Yaniv, I'll chime in on this slide, and basically, although it's not about exact filtering, we still wanted to highlight the ability to use tagging and enrichment as part of our Logstash plugin. So we have the ability in Logstash configuration to actually enrich tagging and do translation to the fields. So it's usually with a simple configuration where you can, for example, enrich DNS with IP addresses. And if I'll zoom in a bit here, you'll be able to see the first example in this config where we actually enrich DNS properties. So of course, we're using the output plugin, Yaniv, which you mentioned earlier with the properties of the workspace key. And to enrich the DNS properties, we're using Logstash configuration where we actually have the host name, and then we can replace it with IPs and other properties as well. In the second example here, we actually translate and do some tagging and translation. So as you can see here, we have like the translation of the severity. Again, with using the filter and the range configuration in Logstash.
Great. Thanks, Eddie.
So what happens when the collection agent cannot be installed on the VMs? So we wanted to take the opportunity and discuss on Linux in this case. So the use case, as we mentioned, we want to collect Linux event without the need to install the agent on each VM. For that, we're using, of course, log forwarder. And we have two options here. One is having the log forwarder on-prem, and then all the VMs on-prem, all the Linux VMs are sending the logs to the log forwarder on-prem, of course, and the log forwarder would send over TLS in a RESTful API on port 443 to the Azure Sentinel workspace, of course, on Azure. If we zoom into the log forwarder VM, of course, it has the log analytics agent installed on it. It has, of course, our syslog or syslog ng. And this is a kind of a zoom into the log forwarder VM to explain you what is installed on it. The other option is for any reason or any requirement the customer would have to have the log forwarder on Azure. And then we can, of course, support express route. The default port would be 6514. And same goes here. Same setup on the log forwarder VM, and the same transport between the log forwarder VM and the protocol, of course, between the log forwarder VM and the Azure Sentinel workspace.
Okay, and Eddie, if I may chime in a bit, this is our collector machine basically allow us to collect from multiple sources. These multiple sources can be other Linux operating system or even network devices, and everything reached to the collector itself. We recently published some EPS number, and we can share the commentation about the load that the collector can handle. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Yaniv. And we have this scenario when servers are blocked for internet access. So for that, we would use and recommend to use the OMS gateway. And here we speak about both Windows and Linux events. And as you can see, and let me just zoom into it so you'll be able to see this diagram where we have OMS gateway installed, and the Windows agents are actually sending the events to that log analytics gateway, and from the log analytics gateway we are sending the logs to the log analytics workspace over TCP 443. There is some very simple configuration that can be done on the agent setup GUI that we have for the OMS gateway, mentioning, of course, the proxy server address, and that's about it, from configuration perspective. We also have a link here for you for the Linux configuration guide, which obviously is the more file-oriented rather than GUI-oriented. So, Yaniv, would you like to take us into the depth of RBAC and restrictions?
Yeah. Let's talk permission and RBAC, please. So we have scenario that customer ask a specific roles or specific access to a logs. But before we dive into Sentinel specific scenario, let's first review log analytics, the RBAC model, general model. We all know that Sentinel is a layer on top of log analytics. So let's first deal with the classic model of permission. You can see in the top area in the slide, we have the persona from, it can be a central admin, it can be a SOC analyst that need access to all the data in the workspace, and of course, all the logs in Azure Sentinel aggregated into tables inside a workspace. So we can use the classic control, give a workspace reader, and then the admin can have full visibility into all log file. But now we have a new persona that can be application owner, can be a guy that manage the firewall, and he need access only to the portion of the logs. And we use tagging. Every log that we are ingested into Sentinel by default is tagged with a resource ID field. And basically when this persona try to query the data, he will retrieve only the raw logs that he has access based on the resource ID. So we don't need to give him any access to the workspace level. He is basically getting its access because he has access to the resource itself. So this is the resource context module.
So Yaniv, I think that just before we go to the demo, I'll briefly explain about the scenario you're going to demo in a couple of minutes. So taking it into the field, so we wanted to show you a simplified scenario for that requirement. So obviously we have the admin SOC or the SOC analyst that is having full read access to the workspace level. But still, we have two personas, one from HR and one from IT, that the requirement for them is to see the specific logs that are relevant for them, whether it's HR or IT. And we see this diagram on the right side of the split between the whole workspace and the specific records in the logs. So how do we achieve that actually? Still, Logstash can provide us the configuration and the ability to enrich the payload with additional fields. The field that we want to enrich with is, of course, the Azure Resource ID. So we will achieve the role level permission by injecting this Azure Resource ID field, which represents the resource group ID in Azure, which is quite a common use case where we create these role level permission separations. In this case, it's IT, HR, finance, like departments in your organization. It can be regions, geographical regions, or any other requirements. If I zoom in into this example, so what we have here is a simple if statement that toggles between the departments, HR and IT for our example, and the addition of the Azure Resource ID, which stands for the resource group ID, one defined for each department. I really hope it makes sense for you and it's clear enough. But if not, I'm sure the demo that Yaniv will do now will make it much more clear.
Thank you, Eddie. Taking control.
Go ahead.
Let me know when you're able to see my screen.
I can see.
Perfect. Sentinel overview page. Okay, so we said that we have logs that come in from the same source, but in different tag. And I want just to show you the example of the raw event. This is how it looks, and this is the field that Logstash basically look and decide how to tag the resource. So from persona level, Eddie showed you nice diagram with the scary guy with the hat. I'm just logging with it. He is the admin, and once he will get to logs and try to query the data, and we have the IIS file in this example, so he goes to IIS.cl. This is a custom table, and as you can see, if I scroll a bit, you will see that he's seeing data with page HR and IT. So this is exactly what we want. He is the hunter, he is the SOC analyst. He needs to have full access to the data, full visibility. But now we have a new persona, Adele, we gave Adele only access to a resource group. We created an empty resource group just to give the permission. So in the IAM, she has a read access. And when I go to the logs in the resource, and this is important to note, we need to query the data from the resource group itself. And I will try to query with the same table, if it will load, of course, with the same table. You will see that because Adele is part of the HR team, she is only able to see data that come in from HR. Hopefully it's not small enough, but you see only HR. So she doesn't see any data that come in from IT because Diego, he is the one that has access to the IT. And again, we are looking on the same Sentinel workspace, same logs, but now if Diego will go to the logs area and try to query the same table, he will see different result and in this way, we can achieve here only IT. So in this way, we can basically achieve row level permission, specific permission on the row level. Admin can see all, Adele can see HR, and Diego can only see IT.
Perfect, Yaniv.
Hopefully it was clear.
Yeah, very practical and clear demo. Thank you for that. So I'm grabbing now back and let me know that you can see the presentation.
All good.
I'm able. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Perfect. Thank you. Cool. So we're moving forward to the next scenario. Customer would like to split between ops and sec logs. So this is really about what the customers are keen to get in their log analytics workspace. This is also about cost because operational logs are not necessarily valuable for the SOC, and therefore we hear from customers the requirement to split between the logs and have the security logs in Azure Sentinel workspace and operational logs in log analytics workspace. So, Yaniv, you mentioned earlier the Azure Monitor Agent, aka our new agent. So both AMA and MMA support multi-homing only for Windows events. We spoke about the main use case, no need to reiterate on that. So what we see on the left side is actually the GUI for configuring the workspaces for the MMA. Here you will specify the workspaces that you'd like the MMA agent to send the logs. With AMA, we have the DCR, data collection rules approach, which Yaniv mentioned earlier, a JSON file that can be edited with the data sources, the data streams, the destinations, of course. We unfortunately don't have the time in this session to go and zoom into it, but you have this ability, and of course, you can use it with both MMA and MMA. Just the AMA is working in a different approach than the MMA with the data collection rules. As far as it goes for Linux, it's important to mention that only the current, the new agent AMA supports multi-homing, and same goes here. You define your data collection rules, and some of the definitions already appear in the GUI. Some can be updated on the JSON, and that will enable you to do multi-homing for Linux, whether for operational logs or security logs. With regards to custom collection, here we'll touch base on various custom logs, whether it's IIS, Apache, application logs, security logs that are not the ones that we support out of the box. But I promised more questions. So without saying further explanation on that, like, what would you think the collection you would use, the method for collection you would use, whether it's Logic Apps or Azure Functions? So,
But when dealing with math row logs, Eddie, let me reiterate it. Yeah.
Yep, Yaniv, thank you for emphasizing that. That's very important. So we see some questions coming in.
So when dealing as a connector, basically the Azure Logic App or the Azure function that you want to pull mass amount of logs and sending it to Sentinel, this question basically what solution or serverless collection piece you will use. It's a tie.
It's interesting to see that, yes, sometimes it's a tie. Now Logic Apps is increasing. No, okay.
And we see some connectors that come in with the Azure Sentinel now that implement by Azure function. It can be a Python-based connector or even PowerShell-based connector.
It's a good opportunity also to mention our GitHub repository, Azure Sentinel. When speaking about custom collection, you will find there a variety of custom connectors, both with Azure Logic App, and Azure Functions. So you're more than welcome to visit the GitHub repository, and I'm sure it will be valuable for those use cases for you. Yep, so we see some advantage in numbers for Logic Apps, Yaniv.
Surprisingly, Eddie. Can we tell the answer or we need to wait a bit?
I think it's, we're almost there. It's not changing. Here it changed a bit, but it seems like, yeah, we have an advantage in numbers for Logic Apps, but maybe we'll have a surprise in a second. No. Okay, about 60% for Logic Apps and 40% for Azure Functions. Keeping in mind the time. Go ahead, Yaniv.
Yes, so to me, and this is what we also recommend our customer in deployment, when dealing with a big chunk of data that you know, acting as a connector that pull data, huge amount of data each and every hour, each and every 30 minutes, we will recommend use Azure Function, and the main reason will be cost. So we all know that Azure Logic App is basically action-based pricing, and sometimes it can be a bit pricey when dealing with a huge amount of data. So from technology-wise, both wonderful, both doing the work, but we will recommend go to Azure Function basically because of price.
But as you mentioned, both scalable and can do the work. But it's also a matter of preferences, whether you want to code more or code less, right? Because Logic App is codeless, and with Azure Functions, you need to code more.
Yeah, indeed.
So with that, custom collection. This is the scenario we're focusing now. So can be achieved in various ways, whether it's with PowerShell. And we just released in the beginning of the year our supported PowerShell module, fully supported, and you're more than welcome to have a look at it and explore it if you didn't do it so far. We can use, of course, Logic Apps, whether it's scheduled Logic App or HTTP triggered, for collecting logs, whether there are files, whether it's from database, RESTful APIs, on-premise gateways, etc. Or if you prefer to code, of course, you can use Direct API with Azure Functions, of course, a serverless service with C#, PHP, Python, Ruby. And by the way, Yaniv, some of our customers are even combining Logic Apps with functions, right?
Yes. Basically, Logic App can call Azure Function, even Azure Automation, and allow us also to do operation in on-prem server. And you can have vice versa, like Azure Function that will call a HTTP endpoint of Logic App. So they can live together, and sometimes we combine it. We can see a scenario like this.
Great, thanks. So if we zoom in a bit into the collection from files scenario, so here with the Log Analytics workspace configuration, we are providing you a use case with using OTD as an example for Linux log files. So when we collect it in this way, we are collecting into custom tables, which Yaniv mentioned earlier. And it's important to mention that the table name would be the log file name _CL if you're looking for it. And what we see on the left side in the process flow diagram is actually what happens behind the scene. We parse it in just in time. We can parse it query time, of course, and eventually query the logs. So quite easy to implement as far as we hear from our customers.
Indeed, and you need, of course, agent on each and every endpoint that you collected. So
yep, absolutely. So Yaniv, I think it's time to discuss Office 365 events collection.
Yeah, Office 365, one of the popular data source, data connector that we have in the product. We know that the connector itself is live in a boundary of Azure AD tenant. And in this scenario, we are sharing use cases for customers that want to collect Office 365 log from multiple tenants. The customer itself has a multiple AAD tenant and basically has a different Office 365 deployment. It can be because of a region. In this use case, we are seeing like we have the EU office or the US, and they want to aggregate the logs to a single workspace. So they want like in one query to get the data, and they don't want to run cross workspace query. So we are showing you two examples here, and with a link, of course, to an article, how you can aggregate data from multiple workspaces, multiple Office 365. We are working with the management API and store them in a custom table, of course, in single Azure Sentinel workspace. This is the left scenario, like consolidating into single workspace. Important note, because we are storing the data in the custom log, the data itself in the table will not be free, because we all know that the Office 365 connector give us a free ingestion on the table, on the Office activity. But when dealing with the custom connector and custom table, it's basically charged a billable table. The example number 2 is the API side. We have single AAD tenant with single Office 365 deployment. And now from compliance reason, from regulation, from department, for permission even maybe, we want to split the data based on some criteria. We can look on some properties of the logs, but we want to split it to multiple workspaces. We want maybe to split it to Azure Sentinel that only the US SOC can see, or maybe the EU. So we are using the same method, the same management API that can read data, or if it's AAD, we can use security graph, of course, and we are writing it to multiple location. Again, custom table. So this is the two scenario. We are seeing it from big customer normally with multi-region and regulation. Anything to add, Eddie?
No, just the fact that, again, we have the two options where we started from with the question. So we have both options available, whether to implement it with an Azure function or the Logic Hub.
Indeed. Okay, other Office 365 scenario. The Office 365 connector today connect from SharePoint, Exchange, OneDrive, Teams. He is working on top of the management API and listening to a specific record type that we define that make the most sense from security perspective. But sometimes we hear from customer that they want more event that is not exposed in the built-in connector. So in this use case, we are giving you example how you can interact with the management API. It's a custom solution that it's live inside in our GitHub that Eddie mentioned, and you can pick and choose the specific record ID that you want to collect. In the left side, you can see that we are picking here for teams, and we hear customer that find some useful scenario security solution that work with a team shift event maybe, or maybe they want to see other activity, admin activity that by default is not collected by our connector. So we have a solution that you can deploy and you can define the record ID. And again, this data will find itself in a custom logs, but you can do aggregation between the built-in connector and the custom table.
So Yaniv, this connector is the custom connector resides in GitHub, right?
Indeed, indeed, and we have direct link that you can do ARM deployment and define the record ID as parameters.
Great, great. So let's move to AWS and GCP. We hear more and more customers that are asking to collect more and more logs from AWS and GCP to better protect their resources on these clouds. So for AWS, we have three options to collect the logs. The first one, it's important to say that they all reside in GitHub and were developed by our team members. So we have the first one developed by Nicholas Dekula, where we actually implemented the ability to import logs from AWS S3 using AWS Lambda and Log Analytics API, of course. A different angle for actually the same goal was developed by Sridhar, and it's about importing the CloudTrail logs to Azure Sentinel here as well using AWS Lambda and Log Analytics API with the addition of using SQS, SNS, so a bit more support for queuing. And the third option is very similar as well, but here we use Azure Functions instead of AWS Lambda. So pick your flavor, your best or preferred flavor, but eventually we have these three solutions that can be very valuable for our customers that are looking to collect logs from AWS. For GCP, both solutions support collection of logs from GCP, and here in the first one we're using GCP Cloud Functions together with Log Analytics API, also developed by Sridhar from CXE, and I hope you can see the diagram. Unfortunately, we don't have time to zoom in, but it's based on PubSub. As you can see, I'll zoom in a bit so you could see this architectural diagram of the solution. We have some scheduling mechanism here and retry mechanism. Eventually, we're pulling the logs from GCP to Log Analytics workspace. And the other one is utilizing Logstash with the Google PubSub input plugin, and then forwarding it into Log Analytics. So zooming in a bit to see the details here of the configuration. So of course, the input with Google PubSub with the right properties, and of course, the output is the output plugin for Log Analytics with the relevant properties for the workspace and the workspace key, etc. So with that, we're almost by the hour. Yaniv, would you like to add something regarding the collection from AWS and GCP?
I want to tell maybe a hint that we as a product working on mostly on the AWS on a built-in connector that will bring more and more data. This is still in roadmap, but we have a great a solution that written by our engineers, but we are working on a built-in connector.
Yep. So we wanted to leave a few minutes for Q&A. And for that, our last question for you, to still keep it interactive. So you're more than welcome to ask a few questions, which we can try and answer in the next few minutes, and the rest of them will be answered offline afterwards. Just
basically open floor for questions.
Yep. Would consolidation of logs from multiple geo tenants run into any GDPR compliance issues? Okay, great question.
So of course, we can touch on compliance, but this is something that comes mostly from customer requirement, and when they ask us to consolidate or even split, it's need to align with the GDPR and other compliance regulation.
Regarding the CloudWatch connector, I think the hint that Yaniv provided answers that question.
Yeah, let's keep it as a hint, but yeah, we are focusing on cloud collection. Sentinel is also acting as a cloud native SIEM, and we want to cover it. So we have regarding Teams, I can maybe chime in about the Teams call. So this is something also that we work as a team. We have currently a custom solution that allow us to collect more audit log from Teams. We are working with the Office 365 team to see if they expose more event in the management API, then we can connect it as the connector.
We see some repeating questions.
So we have the Azure function manipulate log. Okay, regarding the workbook question, I think that we need to take it offline. It's a bit more specific scenario.
Do you have plan to collect Teams? Yeah, you answered that one as well.
Yeah. And guys from the chat, also, if you heard an interesting question, Tiander, and you want to chime in, please, unmute yourself and chime in.
Going through the questions, also, is it possible to collect from OCI?
I'm not sure what is OCI.
I was just trying to hope that you would have it. Ramesh, could you elaborate on OCI?
But basically, if it expose API or expose it to syslog or Ceph, we of course can hook this data source and collect it. This is like sometimes a challenge to us, or we want to hook the API. But yeah, we need more details.
And that would relate, of course, to the custom collection we mentioned, right, Yaniv?
Indeed.
Anything can be done eventually, whether you're using Azure Functions or Azure Logic Apps in a custom way, and yeah, as long as it has a RESTful API or a file we can collect, then it's doable.
Well, all in all, this was a great session, guys. Very interactive. We have lots of questions that came in that our team did a great job answering. So I think we got as much as possible out of that. And again, just to remind folks that if they have additional questions that they would like to ask after this webinar, they can always visit us at the Azure Sentinel forum at aka.ms/Azure Sentinel community. Thank you, Eddie and Yaniv, for an excellent presentation. And I would like to also remind the listeners that the best way to ensure that you don't miss any future webinars like this, please visit us on our landing page at aka.ms/security community. And while you're there, you'll find the easy way to navigate and find the resources, some of the resources that were actually, in fact, shared during this webinar, and learning content relevant to our security products and to your own needs. So a good start, would be by browsing the bit-sized product videos that we have, the Ninja trainings, the recordings of the past webinars, as well as the GitHub communities and more. And for future webinars, please visit us at aka.ms/security webinars. This is also the location where we would be posting the recording of this. If you scroll down, you'll find it there. And thanks again. And I want to thank all of you for being part of our community and for joining us on webinars like this. We hope to see you next time. Goodbye.